Um, let's move on to the SVB Signature Bank whole contagion scenario. So, last week on our show we were discussing SVB. Well, the last 3 weeks we've been discussing SVB, and I read an article after we discussed because I was researching that term contagion, and I told you watch they're going to use that a lot. And our old friend Barney Frank was back in the news, and I found this article very, very enlightening and kind of indicative to what I said a couple weeks ago when I talked about how politicians are going to use this for political advantage. They're gonna they're gonna sit there and probably take over banks that don't need to be taken over. And I think there's some sort of plan, or they're really inept. Our politicians are really inept, and either one of those things. I think what happened is a lot of people should sit back and say, "We stop screwing things up." So let me read a little bit of this article, and then we can discuss it. So this article I found says Barney Frank's signature bank was seized to send banks a message. All right, right. So then you start reading it, and it says a regulatory takeover of a New York based bank was intended to send a message to U.S. banks to stay away from cryptocurrency business. A former member of Congress who was on the bank's board says. So that's Barney Frank. He's basically saying, first statement, this bank was taken over to send a message. Is that what the government's job is to do?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like you said, it's like this. It has very it's eerily similar to what happened in 2008. In 2008, you had the Federal Reserve, which is all pretty much smoke and mirrors, by the way. But they were saying, "Oh,
Yes.
everything's fine. We have all the tools that we need to deal with any crises." And
Everything.
sure enough, you had Bear Stearns collapsed in March, and then they said they had all the tools, and they invented new tools at the time. I think in 2008, it was like the total, it was like TARP, like total
Yep,
asset
Tar.
relief program, and there was another one, TAF. So they started introducing all these new tools to bail out the banking system. The exact same thing has happened so far in 2023. They said they had all the tools that they needed, then all of a sudden they introduced, I think last Sunday or the Sunday before, the BTFP program, which pretty much announced unlimited liquidity to banks that need bailouts. And it's just it's eerily similar to 2008. Obviously, like you called, the contagion word has become
Oh,
more popular in the press, and we're
oh,
seeing that more and more often. And now you
what?
see the, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll get to that because it's going to be in there. I don't want to spoil it for everybody. So, so let me read a little bit more, and then we'll get to that because trust me, it's the next couple of pages. Barney Frank also said this was just a way to tell people we don't want you dealing with crypto. And then it goes on. The bank said it was the first FDIC insured bank to launch a blockchain based digital payments platform, right? So then Barney Frank goes on to tell them that by Friday, there were more withdrawals based solely on the contagion from SVB. He said the situation had stabilized by the time Sunday that the New York regulators took it over, right? And this is the third largest banking failure in the US. Let me go one more page because he said something very telling, right? Let me adjust this for our people at home that are reading this. Frank said that the FDIC had agreed to insure the entire deposits on Friday rather than waiting until Monday. Signature would not have been taken over. And then at the bottom, like you said the last time, he said he expects some vindication when the bank is sold eventually. I believe they're going to get a very good price, Frank said, proof that it was not a bank problem. So, for a lot of people that don't understand what's going on and what's being said here, okay, is the federal government is using that idea of contagion, right? It makes sense. We just got out of a pandemic, so use same terminology to get people to be afraid. Then what they do is they didn't do what they were supposed to do on Friday, and if they did what they were supposed to do on Friday, the bank wouldn't need to be taken over. But nope, the federal government, we're gonna make a example out of you, and we're gonna take you over because we don't want you dabbling in crypto. It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know what you think. It just blows my mind that this is where we are with this.
Well, they have to take out the competition, right? So all these countries have been introducing central bank digital currencies, or
Yep.
CBDCs for
Yeah.
short. And obviously this is the government's way of combating crypto, because I think at first crypto was seen as this kind of fringe technology that wasn't, a lot of people didn't think would take off, but obviously it has taken off. You've seen the market share of crypto, it's grown to over $2 trillion, and you've seen a lot of people pour money into it because they don't trust the banking system, they don't trust the Federal Reserve, they don't trust that. Like the banking system has become so complicated that a lot of people want nothing to do with it. They don't feel like their money is safe there. So obviously crypto has grown, and that's been proven in the market share that it's grown. And the government sees this as a potential threat, especially the banking industry. I mean, crypto hasn't really become fully mainstream yet, but it's becoming there. And I mean, once it does, that's a huge threat to the banking industry in itself. So they're definitely, this is definitely something that they see as a potential risk down the road.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong too. Like, one of the big lures of cryptocurrency is privacy. Right? Between two people, they can do a transaction that's between two people and no one else has to know. One of the things that strikes me out, and I hope a lot of people realize this, and I think this is a good thing to talk about, and hopefully more people talk about this, is we're sitting here and big banks are failing. And it seems like the plan, if you listen to certain people, is they want like 6 banks to be left by 2025. They want to kill all banks except big banks. I go, how does that even make sense? We have banks that are too big to fail, doing stupid things, and the prescription to solve this problem is less banks. Right? Like when I think it was the Great Depression, right? When they put all those banking rules in and they broke up banks because they were too big. And over the years, laws have been loosened, regulations have been loosened, allowing these banks to get big again. And what they're going to sit here and tell people is like, oh, well, all these banks are failing. We have to help them out. And the thing we're going to do is make less banks. And we're also going to give you a currency that we're going to track every little thing we do, and you're going to have no privacy. I really hope people stop, think about it, and realize, hey, I'm going to call my elected official. Like, I don't want that. I think I read this week at least 21 states have started to do legislation against CBDC, and I hope it works. But I think that's one of the enumerated powers that the federal government has, is to have a currency. So unless something major happens, I think we're heading on this road, which I don't want. Like, I want to be able to transact with people. I want to go to a yard sale, not have to pull out my phone, and then the federal government's like, hey, you bought that, and the guy that bought it, like, you got to pay tax on that thing. I mean, is that really where we want to go? I mean, that sounds like a hellhole for me.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point too with transparency in the banking system, because once you put your money into a bank, we've talked about this before, it gets like lent out. Obviously, banks need to make money, so they lend it out as mortgages or other financial products, and there's really no transparency into what's being done with your money once it's inside the bank. And there's actually this great South Park episode where I think Kyle or someone donates $100, and he's like, "Thank you for your $100 deposit. We just invested it in foreign currency FX swaps, and it's gone."
It's gone.
He's like, but wait, I just gave it to you. He's like, and it's gone. Next person, please. He's like, what do you mean?
He's like, you're no longer a customer. So the next customer comes, and it just keeps playing. But and that was old. That was old too. I sat there, and if no one's watching, you got to go find that. It's hilarious, but somewhat true.
Well, yeah, and that's what a lot of these banks have run into, where they take the deposits and they use it into these other financial products. And I mean, you see derivatives just blow absolutely out of control on banks' balance sheets, and these are some of the things that are getting them into trouble now. And now they're kind of scrambling for cash. So it's just lack of transparency, lack of trust. It's no reason. I mean, it's not hard to understand why crypto has become more popular recently when you have this stuff going on in the banking system.
Yeah, the other thing too, I don't think a lot of people understand is, when a bank borrows money from the Fed, right, for their overnight from the discount window, they're borrowing it. They used to be a couple of years ago for almost nothing. So they're basically getting free money from the government, and then they go charge us crazy interest rates. So they're getting free money, they're charging us interest rates, and like, look, we're smart. And then any little thing that goes wrong, they crash. And again, I think this is one of those things. This is one of the sayings I have around. Hopefully, we get this taken off. Is a lot of people outsource their thinking to elite people or smart people or the experts. And I don't know what people have been doing the last 5 years, but if you're going to believe an expert, you're going to have your head checked because there's not too many experts I trust. Most of them are wrong all the time. And the problem is you have people ask simple questions of these experts and they have no answer. Like I said, Janet Yellen a couple months ago, oh, we're great, everything's great. And then this past Friday, she's calling an emergency meeting of banks. But she's sitting there telling the senator, oh, we're great. The banking institution's great. This is transitory inflation. And everyone else is saying it's not transitory. How the hell is this transitory? Because I'm Janet Yellen. And like you said, I get a lot of money from banks and I get to pick who succeeds and who fails. So one thing, like I said, hopefully out of this show, we get people talking and realize that just because the person is on the TV, just because they're an expert, doesn't mean they're right. Like we have to have critical thinkers. We have to have discussions that just aren't happening. And how can, Justin Thurber and Jimmy Davidson, two guys with a YouTube channel, call something a couple of weeks ago and then it comes true? But you have this person who's supposed to be an expert, Janet Yellen, who keeps getting things wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the experts. I mean, look at where we're just coming out of over the last couple of years on everything related with COVID. You had all the experts calling for all these like draconian measures to deal with COVID, and half of this stuff was just made up. Oh, you have to be 6 feet away, not 5 feet away. Oh, bars have to close at a certain time. It's like, oh, you have to put up you have to stand up as you're entering the restaurant. But once you sit down, everything's fine. You can take off your mask and you can eat. It's just like all this stuff was drummed up by the experts, but none of it had any scientific background or anything involved. So, I mean, if that alone doesn't make you question the experts, I don't know what will. And I think it's funny how the same experts that were the ones that were telling you COVID was the end of the world are now the ones saying, oh, don't worry, everything's fine and safe in the banking system. It's like, if that doesn't make you scratch your head, I don't know what will.
Listen, there's a lot of things hopefully in the coming weeks that we get to talk about. And this is kind of going, off what we're talking about right now. But that Anthony Fauci documentary on PBS came out and I started watching it. I just shook my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want to just dice that up. Just take it what it is, play the clip, let people look at it and say, what's wrong with that? Right? The guy's in his house with his mask and his wife's with a mask and they're kissing. And I'm like, it's for the camera. And he's walking out of his office and he sees the camera crew. So he's like, oh, I forgot my mask. Like, you aren't wearing your mask. And the only reason why you did that is because the camera crew was there. You're not wearing your mask. And he's sitting down, mind you, after being fully vaccinated. He's sitting down talking to a guy that's in there, one of his coworkers, and he's doing the whole mask thing. I'm going to make myself something to eat because he was at Anthony Fauci's house, and he's walking around his whole house with his mask on, talking. As soon as he sits down, he takes it off. I'm like, what was the point? What was the point? So, like I said, it's very telling. It gives an inside look. Like, listen, granted, super smart guy, has a really good background. But that doesn't mean you're right on everything. And we need these dissenting voices. And that kind of goes back to the GOP caucus, like we were talking about, is if the people that are in charge aren't doing the right things, especially in this day and age with videos, with YouTube channels like this where we can talk about it and people can see things and someone can post a video online or that email can get out to me who doesn't know much about it. It's not even my area, so I'm sure a lot more people know. That stuff can get out. People seeing this stuff and they're starting to get really ticked off. We need to do better. I want to do better. So I don't know. Like, what do you think? We're going to hit illegal licenses next to it. That's a whole other story.
Yeah, it's just a good point. It's like, what we're talking about is we're at the point where we don't need the problems that we have in society are not technology problems. They're people problems. And, the problems that we're facing, it isn't because there's not smart people around. It's because people are operating with bad intentions. It's like all we need really is to get people operating in good faith.
Yes.
And people that want to, come to that have integrity and want to come to the right solutions, and that will get rid of a lot of the problems that we have. But if you look across the economy, you look across politics, most of it's because there's an agenda, there's money, there's a lot of stuff involved that people are a lot of resources that people are jockeying for. So that's really what it comes down to. It's like anytime you listen to a politician or anything, it's like you really have to find out what their true intentions are, what their agenda is. Do they really want to mean well by the people, or do they have some ulterior motive going on in the background?
Yeah, and like you said a little bit earlier, like in my phrase that I'm trying to get out there, so everyone, I'm gonna put on T-shirts, right? Don't outsource your thinking, right? Stop outsourcing your thinking. Like, I think we went to school and learned how to think, but I think this day and age people don't. People are told things and they just believe it. And you can present them with the facts and they won't change. And we gotta do better. Like, on a whole, we have to do better.